There is a specific kind of stillness that resides within the entrance of a home where the world seems to pull back. The stone underfoot feels solid and permanent, a grounding force against the lightness of the morning air. Here, the edges are deliberate and sharp, yet they do not intrude upon the sense of ease. The gray slate pebbles rest in their places, undisturbed by the passage of time or footsteps. One observes the way the light touches the surface of the boxwood, turning the deep greens into shades of pale jade where the sun hits the leaves. It is a space defined by what is not there, a refusal of clutter that allows the eye to simply rest. The house stands as a silent sentinel, its dark walls providing a canvas for the shifting shadows of the early hours. Everything is held in a state of quiet anticipation, a threshold that asks for nothing but presence. The air is cool and carries the faint scent of damp earth and stone. It is enough to simply stand here, between the street and the door, and feel the weight of the day settle into something manageable and soft. The enclosure offers a sense of absolute privacy, a small world hemmed in by the warm vertical lines of the timber fencing. At the center, the delicate structure of the maple reaches out, its branches skeletal and fine against the pale sky. The white stones below create a bright floor that reflects the light upward, illuminating the underside of the leaves with a gentle glow. There is no sound here other than the internal rhythm of the space. The concrete of the planter is cool and smooth to the touch, a heavy anchor for the ethereal life it holds. To look at this corner of the yard is to understand the luxury of limited scope. Nothing moves. The air is trapped within these wooden walls, becoming still and heavy with the peace of the morning. The shadows of the slats create a rhythmic pattern across the stones, moving so slowly they appear static. It is a composition of texture-rest rough bark, the polished stone, the matte concretile existing in a harmony that requires no explanation. One feels the perimeter of the home pressing in, creating a safe, silent pocket of existence. The glass acts as a bridge between the interior life and the garden, a transparent barrier that holds the reflection of a quiet world. In the pane, the ornamental grasses appear as a soft blur of gold and green, swaying in a wind that cannot be felt. The limestone boulder sits heavily in the frame, its surface pitted and ancient, providing a contrast to the perfect flatness of the window. The reflection captures the wall of the house next door, reminding the viewer of the narrow, intimate scale of this residential pocket. It is a scene of layers, where the physical and the reflected merge into a single image of domestic peace. The afternoon light is honeyed and thick, clinging to the edges of the grass and the grain of the stone. There is a profound sense of being tucked away, shielded from the wider world by these layers of glass and greenery. Silence is visible here. It lives in the way the light fades across the stone and the way the reflection remains undisturbed by movement. The house breathes in silence, and the garden breathes with it, a shared lung of light and texture. The porch is a study in the balance of dark and light, where the matte black of the ceramics absorbs the brightness of the day. The wood of the deck is pale and clean, showing the fine grain of oak that has been meticulously cared for. The succulents within the pots are sculptural, their thick leaves holding moisture and light in a display of quiet resilience. The white stucco wall behind them is a blank canvas, catching the subtle gradients of the indirect sun. There is a feeling of order here that borders on the sacred. Every pot is placed with an eye for the space between, ensuring that the air can move freely around the forms. The silence is tactile, felt in the smoothness of the pottery and the warmth of the wood. This is a garden of increments, where beauty is found in the curve of a leaf or the texture of a rendered wall. It is a small, elevated world that sits just outside the door, offering a moment of clarity before the threshold is crossed. The light does not glare. It simply exists, filling the space with a soft, pervasive glow that suggests a timeless afternoon. In the narrow corridor between the home and its boundary, the world narrows to a path of basalt and shadow. The heavy pavers are dark and cool, set into sand that swallows the sound of any movement. On one side, the concrete wall of the house rises up, a massive and silent presence that provides a sense of profound security. On the other, the black metal fence creates a rhythmic barrier, domesticating the view. The ferns that emerge from the gaps are delicate, their green fronds unfurling in the dappled light that filters down from above. This is a liminal space, a passage that is also a destination in its own right. The light moves in patches across the ground, highlighting the texture of the stone and the softness of the moss. There is no urgency here. The path does not demand to be walked. It simply exists as a line of transit through a quiet landscape. The air is stiller here than in the open yard, held captive by the proximity of the walls. It is a space of echoes and shadows, where the small details of the earth are given room to speak in the absence of noise. The sound of the water is a vertical line of clarity in the horizontal silence of the garden. It falls from the black steel with a steady, unchanging rhythm, meeting the surface of the basin without a splash. The water is clear, showing the dark, rounded shapes of the polished pebbles resting at the bottom. The iris leaves nearby are sharp and upright, their deep green surfaces reflecting the subtle movement of the liquid. This is the heart of the garden's stillness, a movement so repetitive and controlled that it becomes a form of rest. The light catches the curve of the falling stream, turning it into a thread of silver. Around the basin, the garden is motionless. The stones are dry where the water does not reach, and the air is cool from the evaporation. There is a sense of meticulous design in this small corner, where every element has been chosen to contribute to a singular feeling of calm. The world outside the garden walls feels distant and unnecessary. Here, the focus is narrowed to the point where the water meets the stone, a constant and quiet conversation that has no beginning and no end. Two chairs sit facing the garden, empty but inviting, their thin black frames etched against the pale gravel of the terrace. The marble table between them is a small island of white, its surface smooth and cold. This is a place for sitting and doing nothing, a designated spot for the appreciation of the enclosure. The tall cypress trees form a dark green wall that shuts out the neighborhood, creating a room with the sky as its ceiling. The light of the late afternoon is long and golden, stretching across the gravel and climbing the low concrete wall. There is a profound sense of arrival in this space. It is the end of the journey from the street, a private sanctuary built of simple materials and careful proportions. The air is quiet, the trees do not sway, and the chairs remain perfectly still. The silence is layered, built from the muffled sounds of the distant world and the absolute stillness of the immediate surroundings. It is a luxury of space and time, where the simple act of looking at a stone wall or a tree becomes an event of significance. The sunset is captured in the dark glass of the door, a wash of orange and purple held within the architectural frame. The ornamental grasses in the foreground are silhouettes now, their fine plumes catching the last of the direct light. The concrete step is broad and flat, a clean transition from the organic textures of the garden to the controlled environment of the home. There is a sense of homecoming in the way the light settles on these surfaces. The reflection in the glass makes the garden feel twice as large, yet twice as enclosed, as it mirrors the boundary trees against the darkening sky. Everything is transitioning into the blue hour, that time when the colors of the garden deepen and the details begin to soften into shadow. The silence is heavy now, a blanket that covers the house and the yard. There is no movement from the door, no flicker of life from within, just the steady reflection of the ending day. The world is narrowing to this single point of entry, a quiet portal between the wildness of the sky and the stillness of the interior. The brass of the house number catches the failing light, glowing with a dull, warm luster against the dark timber. The pine needles are soft and numerous, a tactile contrast to the hard metal and the linear wood. This small detail is a marker of identity, yet it is nearly swallowed by the garden's growth. The twilight is blue and deep, turning the green of the pine into a shade of charcoal. There is a quiet confidence in this composition, a sense that the home does not need to shout its presence. It is tucked away, identified only by this subtle glint of brass. The air is cool and still, and the garden feels as though it is leaning in toward the house. The textures are the focus Harith grain of the wood, the brush of the metal, the sharpness of the needles. All of them exist in a state of suspended animation. The day has retreated, leaving behind a series of vignettes that define the perimeter of the home. It is a moment of total peace, where the small markers of human life are integrated perfectly into the natural world of the garden. In the darkness, the garden is redefined by the light that humans have placed within it. The boxwood spheres appear as glowing orbs of green, their roundness emphasized by the soft shadows they cast upon the gravel. The path is a river of shadow, leading toward the warm, rectangular glows of the house windows. The house itself is a dark mass, defined by the light that spills from its interior and the lamps that graze its walls. This is the garden at its most enclosed, the darkness acting as a final wall that shuts out the rest of the world. The silence is absolute, broken only by the visual rhythm of the lights. There is a profound sense of security in this view, a feeling of a world that has been perfectly ordered and protected. The air is heavy with the scent of the evening, and the ground is cool. The light does not travel far. It stays close to the plants and the path, creating a series of intimate pools in the dark. It is a landscape of rest, where the day's work is finished, and the garden simply exists to be looked at from the safety of the glass. The stone bench is a heavy, silent presence in the corner of the yard, its surface cool and damp with the morning mist. It sits low to the ground, emerging from a bed of moss that is so green it appears luminous in the gray light. The ferns around it are still, their delicate leaves untouched by wind. Behind the bench, the brick wall provides a textured backdrop of dark, rhythmic lines. This is a space of deep shade and quiet moisture, a microclimate of peace. The stone is ancient and unyielding, a contrast to the soft, ephemeral life of the moss and ferns. To look at this scene is to feel a slowing of the pulse. There is no movement, no sound, just the steady presence of the materials. The light is flat and even, revealing every pore in the stone and every hair on the fern fronds. It is a garden of the ground, focused on the small, low things that usually go unnoticed. Here, in the enclosure of the brick and the house, these small things are given the space to be magnificent in their stillness. The gate is the final boundary, a matte navy barrier that separates the garden from the world. Its latch is a simple piece of geometry, functional and elegant. Through the narrow vertical bars, a single small tree can be seen, its leaves a soft blur of green against the gray sky. The gate is cold to the touch, its paint smooth and thick. There is a sense of finality in this image, a closing of the circuit. The garden is contained, the house is protected, and the world is kept at bay. The light is soft and diffused, casting no shadows and creating a sense of timelessness. The silence is held in the metal and the wood, a quiet that has been built into the very structure of the home's exterior. One feels the weight of the gate, the potential for it to swing shut and lock the world away. But for now, it simply stands there, a beautiful and silent sentinel at the edge of the property. The tree beyond is a reminder of the life that thrives within this enclosure, a life that is slow, quiet, and perfectly content. From above, the garden reveals itself as a perfect composition of lines and shapes. The paths are straight and purposeful, the planters are balanced, and the green spaces are distributed with mathematical precision. The house and the fence form a square frame around this small world, emphasizing its enclosure and its distance from everything else. The hazy sunlight softens the edges of the architecture, blending the garden into a single, cohesive image of domestic peace. There is no one in the frame. The garden is empty, yet it feels full of intent. It is a space that has been designed for the eyes, a visual proof of the beauty of order and restraint. The silence from this height feels even more profound, a blanket that covers the entire property. The world beyond the fence is invisible, leaving only this small, perfect island of luxury and quiet. It is the final view, a summation of all the small details that make this space a sanctuary. The day is still, the light is soft, and the garden is at rest.